My name is Hannah and I'm 34 years old. Right now, I'm sitting in my cramped apartment surrounded by toys that aren't mine, watching four kids sleep on my living room floor, while their mother, my sister, is out partying somewhere. For 8 years, I've been the unpaid nanny, the emergency contact, the one who shows up. My phone just buzzed with a text from Melissa asking for a family meeting tomorrow. Because she has big news. Something in my gut tells me everything is about to change. Before we dive into how I finally broke free from being my sister's permanent babysitter, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt trapped by family obligations, and stay with me because what happened next changed everything. 8 years ago, my life looked completely different. Melissa was 23 and had just announced her first pregnancy. I remember the exact moment she told us standing in our parents' kitchen, with this nervous but excited smile on her face. I had just graduated from college 6 months earlier and landed my first real marketing job at a startup downtown. The pay wasn't amazing, but I was building my career living in my own studio apartment and feeling like adulthood was finally beginning. Our parents reacted with that mixture of joy and concern that comes when your youngest daughter announces an unplanned pregnancy. Dad kept clearing his throat the way he does when he's processing difficult news, while Mom immediately started talking about baby showers and nursery colors. But I saw the worry in their eyes. Melissa had barely held down a job for more than 3 months, and the father, some guy named Derek she'd been dating for 5 months, seemed less than thrilled about the whole situation. I was genuinely excited to become an aunt. I went with Melissa to her first ultrasound appointment, helped her pick out maternity clothes, and spent hours researching the best cribs and car seats. When she asked if I'd be there for the birth, I immediately said yes. I even started a college fund for my future niece or nephew, putting away $50 from each paycheck. The first red flag came when Melissa was 7 months pregnant. She called me crying one Tuesday afternoon, saying Derek had left for work and hadn't come home. Could I come over just for an hour while she calmed down? That hour turned into me sleeping on her couch because she was having anxiety attacks. The next morning, I had to call in late to work something I'd never done before. My boss wasn't happy, but I explained it was a family emergency. Little Jaden was born on a humid Thursday in July. Derek showed up for the birth, but left 2 hours later, claiming he needed to get back to work. I held my nephew for the first time and felt this overwhelming surge of love and protection. He was so tiny, so perfect, with Melissa's nose and these huge brown eyes that seemed to see right through you. I promised him I'd always be there for him. The pattern started almost immediately. Melissa would text me that she needed to run to the store quick. Could I watch Jaden for just 30 minutes? Those 30 minutes would stretch into 3 hours. Then it became overnight stays because she had a migraine, or needed to work a late shift at the restaurant where she'd gotten a job. I started keeping a pack and play at my apartment, then a high chair, then an entire drawer of baby clothes and diapers. My promotion at work came through 6 months after Jaden was born. I was supposed to be leading a new digital marketing campaign, requiring early morning meetings and some travel. But the same week I got the news, Melissa announced she was pregnant again. This time the father was Jake, a construction worker she'd met at a bar. He seemed more stable than Derek, came to family dinners, even talked about marriage. When Sophia was born 18 months after Jaden, I was in the delivery room again. Jake lasted longer than Derek, almost 6 months before he decided fatherhood wasn't for him, and moved to Colorado for a job opportunity he couldn't pass up. Melissa was devastated, and I watched my little sister crumble while trying to manage a toddler and a newborn. My parents were both still working full-time. Mom was a nurse doing 12-hour shifts, and Dad managed a hardware store 6 days a week. By default, I became the emergency contact for both kids. The daycare would call me when Jaden had a fever. The pediatrician's office had my number as the primary contact. I was the one who knew which formula Sophia preferred, and that Jaden was allergic to strawberries. My first serious relationship since college started when I was 28. Tom was a software engineer I met through a mutual friend. He was patient and understanding at first when I had to cancel dates because Melissa needed me to watch the kids. He even came with me a few times playing with Jaden while I fed Sophia. But after 6 months, he sat me down and said he felt like he was dating a single mother, except the kids weren't even mine. I wanted to argue, but he wasn't wrong. We broke up 2 weeks later. The third pregnancy announcement came at Jaden's third birthday party. Melissa had been seeing someone named Carlos for 2 months. She pulled me aside while the kids were eating cake and whispered that she was pregnant again. I felt my stomach drop. Carlos was nowhere to be seen at the party. When I asked about him, she waved her hand dismissively and said they were taking things slow. By this point, I had depleted most of my savings. Between buying formula when Melissa forgot covering her rent twice when she was between jobs and constantly filling up my gas tank for all the kid-related driving, I had to cancel the Europe trip I'd been planning since college. My friends went without me, sending photos from Paris and Rome while I was cleaning up after 3 kids under 4. Mason was born right before my 30th birthday. Carlos never even met him. Melissa said he'd gotten scared when she told him about the pregnancy and blocked her number. This time I wasn't excited. I loved my nephew immediately, of course, but I felt this crushing weight settling on my shoulders. 3 kids. My sister had 3 kids, no stable job, no partner, and somehow I had become the default parent. The fourth pregnancy was announced at our family 4th of July barbecue. I was exhausted, having spent the previous night up with Mason, who had an ear infection, while Melissa was at a friend's bachelorette party. She gathered everyone around and announced she was expecting again. This time the father was someone named Ryan she'd been dating for 6 weeks. I excused myself to the bathroom and had a complete breakdown, sobbing silently into a towel while my family celebrated outside. Nobody came to check on me. The breaking point had been building for years, accumulating like sediment at the bottom of a river, until everything was murky and suffocating. My daily routine had become a prison of other people's responsibilities. Every morning my alarm went off at 5 because Mason would wake up crying at 5:30, and I needed those 30 minutes to mentally prepare myself for another day of chaos. I'd stumble to my kitchen, make coffee I'd never finish while it was hot, and wait for the inevitable text from Melissa asking if I could take the kids early because she had something important to do. By the time Emma was born, the fourth baby with yet another absent father, I had developed a system. Jaden's backpack by the door, Sophia's special blanket in my car, Mason's formula measured in bottles, Emma's diapers stocked in every room of my apartment. I'd rush all 4 kids to school and daycare before racing to my own job, where I'd arrive frazzled and exhausted, pretending to care about marketing strategies and conversion rates, while secretly calculating how many hours until pickup time. My lunch breaks disappeared entirely. Instead of eating with colleagues or taking a walk to clear my head, I spent them on the phone with the school nurse because Jaden had gotten into another fight, or rushing to the daycare because Sophia had a temperature of 99.5, which meant she couldn't stay, even though she was perfectly fine an hour later. I started eating protein bars in my car between pickups, the only meal I could guarantee I'd actually finish. After work was worse. While my coworkers headed to happy hours or yoga classes, I was supervising homework. I barely remembered how to do myself cooking dinner for 5 while the baby screamed and the toddler drew on my walls with markers I didn't know he had. Bath time was a marathon of negotiations and floods. Bedtime stories stretched until my voice went hoarse, and just when I thought everyone was asleep, someone would need water or have a nightmare or remember they had a project due tomorrow that required supplies we didn't have. Meanwhile, Melissa's Instagram told a different story. Post after post of her out with friends at concerts, wine-tasting beach trips. Living my best life was her favorite caption. Single mom hustle was another, usually posted while I was cleaning vomit off my couch at 2 in the morning. She had thousands of followers who praised her strength and resilience, having no idea that she saw her kids maybe 10 hours a week total. My dating profile became a monument to good intentions. I'd update my photos, write witty answers to prompts, match with interesting people, and then ghost them when they asked to meet. Because how could I explain that I couldn't commit to dinner because my sister might need an emergency babysitter? The few dates I managed to go on ended quickly when I had to leave early because Mason was crying for me and wouldn't settle for Melissa. My friends stopped trying after a while. Sarah's wedding was the final straw for most of them. I was supposed to be a bridesmaid, had bought the dress, attended the shower, planned the bachelorette party. But the morning of the wedding, Melissa called saying she had food poisoning and couldn't watch her own kids. My parents were visiting my dad's sick brother out of state. I spent Sarah's wedding day watching Frozen for the 100th time, while she exchanged vows with the love of her life. The photos from the reception showed an empty space where I should have been standing. Sarah said she understood, but she stopped calling after that. Work became increasingly difficult to manage. My annual review was a disaster. Lax focus and dedication, my manager had written. Frequently distracted, multiple tardies declined travel opportunities. I wanted to scream that I was dedicated, just not to the job that actually paid me. I was raising 4 children who weren't mine, while their mother posted selfies from nightclubs. But I sat there quietly nodding while they put me on a performance improvement plan. I remember my 33rd birthday with perfect, painful clarity. Melissa had promised to take the kids so I could have one day to myself. I'd made plans for a spa day dinner with the few friends who still tolerated my unreliability, maybe even a movie. But that morning, she texted that something came up, so I spent my birthday at Chuck E. Cheese because Jaden had been promised a party for getting good grades. I sat in that loud, sticky hellscape watching other people's kids have meltdowns, while mine, except they weren't mine, they begged for more tokens. Melissa showed up for exactly 12 minutes, long enough to take a selfie with the kids and post about being a blessed mama at her baby's celebration. She didn't mention it was my birthday. When the staff brought out a cake for Jaden singing their corporate birthday song, Emma threw up on my new dress, the one nice thing I'd bought myself in months. Melissa had already left. She texted later, "Thanks, sis," with 3 heart emojis, like that covered everything. I started keeping a journal because therapy was a luxury I couldn't afford time-wise or financially. The entries were furious scratches of pen on paper, the only place I could be honest about my rage. "I hate my sister," I wrote one night. "I love her kids, but I hate what my life has become. I'm 33 years old, and I've never traveled anywhere, never been in love properly, never had a career that mattered, never had a chance to decide if I even want kids of my own because I'm too busy raising hers." The therapist I finally managed to see, after canceling 3 appointments due to babysitting emergencies, told me I was enabling Melissa, that I needed to set boundaries. It sounded so simple in her calm office with its white noise machine and soft lighting. But she didn't understand that setting boundaries with Melissa meant potentially hurting 4 innocent kids who called me Auntie Hannah with such love. It broke my heart every single day. I watched my college friends through social media like looking through a window at a life I should have had. Jennifer got promoted to vice president at her company. Ashley bought a house with her husband, a gorgeous Victorian with a garden. Lauren was traveling through Southeast Asia posting photos from temples and beaches. They were living their 30s while I was stuck in a cycle of sippy cups and temper tantrums that weren't even mine to manage. The worst part was how invisible I felt. At family gatherings, everyone fawned over Melissa, praised her for being such a devoted mother, told her how lucky she was to have such beautiful children. No one mentioned that I was the one who knew their teachers' names, their allergies, their favorite bedtime stories. When Mason took his first steps, it was toward me, but Melissa posted about it like she'd been there. When Sophia learned to read, it was because I spent hours with her sounding out words, but Melissa got the congratulations at parent-teacher conferences she rarely attended. My dream job offer came through email on a Tuesday afternoon, while I was cleaning Play-Doh out of my carpet. A marketing director position at a firm I'd admired since college, with a salary that would have changed my life, but it required relocating to Seattle. I stared at that email for 20 minutes, mentally calculating how impossible it would be. I couldn't leave. Who would watch the kids? Who would make sure they ate vegetables and did their homework and felt loved when their mother forgot they existed? I declined the offer that evening, citing personal obligations, and cried myself to sleep for the first time in years. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October air that usually made me feel hopeful. But as I loaded 4 kids into my car to drive to my parents' house for this family meeting, I felt only dread. Jaden was asking why we had to go to Grandma's so early. Sophia had already spilled juice on her clean shirt. Mason was crying because I'd forgotten his favorite toy, and Emma needed a diaper change, but we were already running late. The house I grew up in looked exactly the same as always, white siding with green shutters, Mom's mums blooming in neat rows along the walkway. But something felt different this time, like the air before a storm. I unbuckled car seats with practiced efficiency, balancing Emma on my hip while herding the others toward the front door. Their voices a chaos of complaints and questions I only half heard. Inside, my parents had set up the formal dining room, the one we only used for holidays and important announcements. Mom had made coffee and her famous cinnamon rolls, the smell filling the house with a warmth that felt almost mocking given what I suspected was coming. Dad was reading his newspaper, but I could tell he wasn't actually processing the words, his eyes stuck on the same spot while he stirred his coffee absently. We waited 45 minutes for Melissa. The kids grew restless. Mason knocked over a glass of orange juice. Sophia started whining about being bored, and I cleaned and entertained and managed like I always did, while my parents watched with expressions I couldn't quite read. Finally, Melissa breezed in like she was right on time, wearing a new dress and fresh makeup, practically glowing with an energy that made my stomach turn. Behind her was a man I'd never seen before, tall and lanky with a guitar case slung over his shoulder, and the kind of carefully disheveled look that took effort to achieve. "This is Travis," she announced, linking her arm through his like they'd been together for years, instead of what I would later learn had been 6 weeks. He played at the coffee shop where I've been working, and we just connected on such a deep level. Travis mumbled a greeting, clearly uncomfortable with the 4 children who were his potential future stepkids, though Sophia was the only one brave enough to approach him asking if he could play Disney songs on his guitar. He laughed nervously and said he mostly played original compositions about the human condition, whatever that meant. I watched him avoid eye contact with the kids and knew immediately this wouldn't last any longer than the others. Melissa waited until everyone was seated, until Mom had served coffee and rolls, until the kids were temporarily distracted with coloring books I'd brought. She stood up like she was about to give a presentation, clasping her hands together, with barely contained excitement. "I have something amazing to share with you all," she began, and I gripped my coffee mug so hard I thought it might shatter. The pause was theatrical, designed for maximum impact, and it worked. Even the kids looked up from their coloring. "Travis and I are expecting," she announced, her voice rising with joy. "I'm pregnant. Due in May." Her hand went to her still flat stomach, and I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath, saw my father's newspaper finally lower completely to the table. The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Mom's smile was forced, the kind she wore when she was trying not to cry at inappropriate times. Dad cleared his throat 3 times before managing a weak congratulations. Travis shifted in his seat, already looking toward the door like he was calculating escape routes. And I sat there feeling something inside me break, with an almost audible crack. "Isn't it wonderful?" Melissa continued, oblivious, or perhaps just indifferent to the tension. "We're thinking of names already. If it's a boy, Travis wants to name him after his grandfather Wolfgang. Can you imagine little Wolfgang?" She laughed high and bright while her existing children colored pictures they'd show her later that she wouldn't really look at. My parents tried to rally, asking appropriate questions about due dates and doctor appointments. Had she been taking prenatal vitamins? How was she feeling? Travis mentioned his band, how they were about to book a tour that could really launch his career, and I watched my father's jaw clench. A touring musician with a pregnant girlfriend and 4 kids from different fathers. The American dream. Melissa started talking about her vision for the nursery, how she'd need to rearrange her apartment, maybe move to a bigger place if Travis's music took off like they expected. She mentioned wanting a home birth this time, something more natural and spiritual with Travis playing guitar during labor. The image was so absurd I almost laughed, but it came out as a strange choking sound that made everyone look at me. Throughout her monologue, the kids continued their activities, unconsciously trained to exist around their mother rather than with her. Jaden was drawing what looked like a family picture, but I noticed he'd drawn me in the center, not Melissa. Sophia had given up on coloring and was braiding Emma's wispy hair with the patience of someone much older than 6. Mason had crawled into my lap without me noticing, his thumb in his mouth, a habit we'd been trying to break. The conversation shifted to practical matters. Mom asked about Melissa's work situation, and she waved dismissively, saying she'd had to quit the coffee shop because the smell of coffee made her nauseous now. Travis would support them with his music, she insisted, even though he hadn't actually been paid for a gig yet. The delusion was breathtaking, but what else was new? When Melissa mentioned wanting at least 2 more kids after this one, to give Wolfgang or whatever they'd name it, plenty of siblings, I felt myself disconnect from my body. I watched the scene from somewhere near the ceiling, saw myself sitting there with Mason in my lap, surrounded by children I'd raised while their mother planned to have more she wouldn't raise either. The assumption was so clear it didn't need to be stated. Hannah would handle it. Hannah always did. My parents kept glancing at me, these quick, worried looks that told me they knew exactly what this meant. Another baby for me to raise while Melissa played at being a free spirit. Another child to love who wasn't mine. Another anchor keeping me in place while life passed me by. Dad started to say something about responsibility, but Melissa cut him off with a hurt look, asking why no one was happy for her. Travis excused himself to take a phone call about the band, and I knew with absolute certainty he'd be gone within 3 months. The pattern was so established it was almost boring. Melissa would be devastated, need more support, lean on me even harder. And I'd allow it because what choice did I have? The kids needed stability, and I was the only one providing it. When it was time to leave, Melissa hugged everyone except me, too busy texting someone to notice I was loading her kids into my car again. She mentioned she and Travis had plans to check out a new venue where his band might play. So could I keep the kids for the afternoon? Maybe overnight? She'd already left before I could answer Travis's beat-up van disappearing down the street while 4 children asked me what was for lunch. The drive home was silent except for Emma's babbling and the radio playing something I didn't hear. Sophia finally asked the question that shattered what was left of my composure. Aunt Hannah, are you going to be our mommy forever since our real mommy is always busy? I couldn't answer through the tears I was trying to hide, but Jaden Wise, beyond his 8 years, said quietly from the back seat, Aunt Hannah is already our real mom. She just doesn't get the title. That night, after I'd fed them dinner, helped with homework, given baths, read stories, and tucked them into the beds I'd bought for my apartment because they stayed over so often, I sat in my bathroom and called the therapist I'd been seeing sporadically. I need an emergency session, I told her voicemail. I think I'm about to do something that will destroy my family, and I need to know if that makes me a terrible person, or if it makes me human. 3 days after the announcement, I spent hours preparing what I needed to say. My therapist had helped me write it out, edit it down to the essential points, without the anger that kept creeping into my first dozen drafts. I practiced in the mirror, keeping my voice steady, maintaining eye contact with my reflection. I knew Melissa would try to derail me, turn herself into the victim, so I prepared responses for every possible manipulation. I called the family meeting for Thursday evening when I knew Travis had band practice and wouldn't be there to complicate things. I arranged for Mrs. Patterson from next door to watch the kids, paying her extra to keep them overnight if necessary. They didn't need to witness what was about to happen, though part of me wondered if Melissa would even notice their absence. Everyone arrived at my parents' house at different times, which somehow made it worse. Mom came straight from work, still in her scrubs, looking tired, but trying to smile. Dad arrived next, carrying a bakery box of cookies like this was a social visit. Melissa showed up 20 minutes late, annoyed that I'd interrupted her pregnancy yoga class she'd just started going to appear more maternal on social media. I waited until everyone was seated in the living room, the same room where Melissa had announced every pregnancy, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays, where our family photos lined the mantel, showing happier times when things were simpler. My hands were shaking, so I clasped them together, feeling the weight of what I was about to do pressing down on my shoulders. I need to say something, and I need everyone to let me finish before responding. I began, my voice stronger than I expected. For 8 years, I have been the primary caregiver for Melissa's children. I have sacrificed my career, my relationships, my savings, my dreams, and my entire sense of self to raise kids that aren't mine. And I can't do it anymore. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Melissa laughed, that dismissive little sound she made when she thought someone was being ridiculous. Oh my God, Hannah, you're being so dramatic. You help out sometimes like any good aunt would. It's not like you're their parent. I pulled out the folder I'd prepared. Would you like to see the receipts? I asked, my voice deadly calm. $47,000 spent on your children over 8 years. Formula diapers, clothes, school supplies, medical co-pays, birthday parties, Christmas presents. Should I continue? Or would you prefer to see the calendar showing that they've spent an average of 5 nights a week at my apartment for the past 3 years? Mom tried to mediate, her voice soothing the way it was when we were children and fighting over toys. Now, Hannah, we all know you've been wonderful with the kids, but family helps family. That's what we do. We support each other through difficult times. Melissa is young, she's still finding her way. She's 31 years old. I snapped my composure, cracking. She's not a teenager who made a mistake. She's a grown woman who keeps having children she has no intention of raising. And you enable her by expecting me to pick up the slack. When does it end? When she has 7 kids, 10. When I'm 50 and still canceling my life to babysit Dad, finally spoke his voice gruff with emotion. Your sister has made some questionable choices. I'll admit that. But those kids need stability, Hannah. They need someone they can count on. If you're not there for them, who will be? The question that had trapped me for years, weaponized against my conscience. Their mother, I almost shouted. Their mother should be there for them. But she's not because she knows I will be. She's never had to step up because I've never stepped back. I've enabled this just as much as you have. Melissa's manipulation started, then tears appearing on cue. I can't believe you're attacking me when I'm pregnant and vulnerable. You've never understood how hard it is being a single mother. You think it's easy for me. You think I don't want to be there for my kids. But I have to work, I have to take care of myself too, or I'll have nothing to give them. You quit your job 3 days ago, I reminded her. You've had 15 jobs in 8 years, Melissa. You've never kept one longer than 4 months. And yet somehow the kids are fed, clothed, educated, and loved. How do you think that happens? Magic. No, it happens because I do it while you post Instagram stories about self-care and living your truth. The accusations flew then. Melissa called me jealous, bitter that I couldn't have kids of my own, so I was trying to steal hers. She said I was controlling, that I insisted on watching them because I needed to feel important. She brought up every perceived slight from our childhood, every time I'd gotten better grades, or Mom had praised me for something, constructing a narrative where I was the villain who'd always resented her. I let her rant, let her spin herself into a fury, because I knew this was coming. When she finally paused for breath, I spoke again. I turned down a proposal from Tom because I couldn't commit to marriage when I was raising your kids. Did you know that he wanted to start a family with me, but I couldn't even consider it because I was already parenting 4 children? That revelation silenced even Melissa for a moment. Mom's hand went to her mouth, and Dad looked at me with something I'd never seen before, maybe understanding, maybe regret. But Melissa recovered quickly, switching tactics. Fine, she said, crossing her arms. If you hate my kids so much, if they're such a burden, I'll make sure they never bother you again. I'll tell them their Aunt Hannah doesn't love them anymore. And there it was, the nuclear option. Using the children as weapons, their love as leverage. My therapist had warned me this would happen, had helped me prepare for it. That's your choice, Melissa, I said quietly. But I'm not negotiating with emotional terrorism anymore. I love those kids more than anything, which is why I'm doing this. They deserve better than to grow up watching their mother take advantage of people, watching me enable that behavior. Mom started crying, then quiet tears sliding down her face. Please don't do this, Hannah, please. We can work something out. Maybe we can help more. Maybe we can hire someone to help with the kids. We're a family. We don't abandon each other. I'm not abandoning anyone, I said firmly. I'm setting boundaries. I will still be their aunt. I will see them on scheduled visits. I will attend their school plays and birthday parties. But I will not be their primary caregiver anymore. I will not put my life on hold indefinitely. And if that makes me selfish, then I guess I'm selfish. The meeting devolved from there. Melissa stormed out, but not before telling me I was dead to her. Mom followed her, trying to calm her down. Dad sat with me in silence for a long moment before saying, "You're doing the right thing, Hannah. Should have done it years ago. We should have helped you do it." The admission was so unexpected, I started crying, 8 years of exhaustion and frustration finally breaking through. I went home to an empty apartment that night, the first time in months. It had been free of children's things scattered everywhere. The silence was deafening. I sat on my couch, the one without juice stains for once, and waited for the guilt to consume me. It was there, certainly, but underneath it was something else. Relief, hope, the possibility of a life that belonged to me. The backlash started before I even woke up the next morning. 47 missed calls from Melissa, 23 from Mom, 18 from various relatives who had somehow already heard the news. Facebook was a war zone. Melissa had posted a long, dramatic status about being betrayed by family, about how some people couldn't stand to see others happy about the struggles of being a single mother with no support system. The comments were brutal. Melissa's friends, most of whom had never met me, called me heartless, selfish, jealous. Someone said I was probably bitter about being barren and taking it out on my poor sister. Another suggested I needed therapy for my control issues. The irony of that last one almost made me laugh. Melissa's high school friend Ashley wrote a novel-length comment about how family should always come first, how she could never imagine abandoning her sister in a time of need. My cousin Rachel called while I was reading the comments. "Hannah, what the hell is going on? Melissa says you've completely cut her off, that you won't even watch the kids anymore. How could you do this to her? She's pregnant and alone." I tried to explain, but Rachel had already chosen her side. The family narrative was being written without my input, and I was the villain. Mom showed up at my work just before lunch, the kids in tow. She looked exhausted, embarrassed, desperate. "They won't stop crying for you," she said quietly, as if volume could minimize the manipulation. "Sophia won't eat. Mason had a nightmare and only wanted you. Please, Hannah, just take them for today. Just today." I stood there in my office building's lobby watching my professional facade crumble as colleagues walked by, trying not to stare at the scene. My manager was probably watching from her office window. This was exactly what I'd been trying to avoid: the bleeding of my sister's chaos into the one space that was supposed to be mine. Security approached asking if everything was all right, and I had to make a choice. "I'm sorry, Mom, but no." I said the words feeling like glass in my throat. "This is exactly what we talked about. I can't keep doing this. You'll have to figure it out just like every other grandparent who babysits occasionally, instead of having a full-time unpaid nanny for a daughter. If Melissa can't care for them, she needs to arrange proper childcare." The security guard escorted them out, while Mom looked at me like I'd transformed into someone she didn't recognize. Maybe I had. The Hannah she knew would have caved immediately, would have taken the kids and apologized for causing trouble. But that Hannah had disappeared somewhere between the fourth pregnancy announcement and the fifth, crushed under the weight of everyone else's expectations. HR called me in that afternoon. There had been complaints about personal disruptions affecting the workplace. They understood family could be complicated, but I needed to ensure my personal life didn't interfere with my professional responsibilities. The irony was suffocating. My personal life had been interfering for 8 years, but only now that I was saying no did it become a problem. That evening, Melissa left all 4 kids on my doorstep. I heard the knock, looked through the peephole to see them standing there with overnight bags, Jaden holding Emma, while trying to keep Mason from running off. Melissa's car was already pulling away. I called the police not to report abandonment, but to ask for advice. They suggested calling CPS if I was truly concerned, but we all knew I wouldn't do that. I brought the kids in, of course I did. Fed them dinner, helped with homework, gave baths, all while fielding calls from relatives I hadn't heard from in years, all with opinions about my selfishness. Aunt Martha sent a 4-page email about family values and how my generation didn't understand sacrifice. Uncle Robert called me a disappointment to my grandparents' memory. The family phone tree had turned into a shame network. When Melissa finally came to get the kids at 11 that night, she was furious that I'd texted her about potentially calling CPS. "How dare you threaten me? I'm their mother." Yes, I wanted to say then act like it, but I stayed silent, letting her rant about persecution and betrayal while the kids sleepily gathered their things, Sophia whispering that she wished they could stay with me forever. The intervention happened 3 days later. I should have seen it coming. Arrived at my parents' house thinking we were having dinner, only to find the living room full of relatives. Grandparents who'd flown in from Florida, aunts and uncles from 3 states away, cousins who'd taken time off work. All there to tell me why I was wrong, selfish, destructive. They went around the room like it was an addiction meeting, each person explaining how my decision affected them, hurt them, disappointed them. How could I abandon family? How could I leave innocent children to suffer? What kind of person turns their back on their own blood? The guilt was orchestrated, coordinated, designed to break me. but I'd come prepared. While they talked, I pulled out my laptop, connected it to the TV, and started a presentation I'd spent the previous night creating. Financial records showing the $47,000 spent. Calendar screenshots showing the children at my apartment 312 days of the previous year. Photos of missed opportunities, canceled trips, rejection emails for jobs I couldn't take. This is what 8 years looks like, I said when they finally stopped talking. This is what you're asking me to continue. I'm 34 years old, and I've never been to Europe, never been promoted past entry level because I can't travel for work. Never had a relationship last more than 6 months. I've raised 4 children who aren't mine while their mother has had the freedom to live like she's childless. So tell me who exactly is being selfish here? The room was silent. Grandma finally spoke, her voice wavering. But Hannah, dear, those children love you. You're the only stable thing in their lives. How can you just walk away from that? I'm not walking away, I said for what felt like the 100th time. I'm setting boundaries. I'll still be their aunt. I'll still love them. But I won't be their primary caregiver anymore. Melissa needs to either step up or arrange proper childcare. There are resources available, government assistance, daycare vouchers, after-school programs. She's chosen not to use them because she's had me. Travis appeared then, Melissa's new boyfriend, looking uncomfortable and out of place. He tried to say something about how they were building a life together, how the new baby would change everything, but even he didn't sound convinced. I noticed he stood near the door ready to escape, and I wondered how many weeks he'd last after the birth. The first 2 weeks of standing my ground were the hardest. Complete radio silence from Melissa, carefully orchestrated to make me worry about the kids. She knew my weakness, knew that not knowing if they were okay would eat at me. Mom sent daily updates, at first photos of the kids at her house looking sad, messages about how Sophia kept asking for me, how Mason wouldn't sleep. Then even those stopped on Melissa's orders. I started my new job the 3rd week, the promotion I'd finally been able to accept once I knew I could commit fully. 30% salary increase, better benefits, regular hours, and the possibility of advancement. My colleagues didn't know about my family situation, and the freedom of that anonymity was intoxicating. I was just Hannah, marketing specialist, not Hannah, the perpetual babysitter. The hiking club I joined met Saturday mornings when I used to be making pancakes for 5. The first hike was only 3 miles, but I cried at the summit, overwhelmed by the simple act of doing something just because I wanted to. The other hikers thought I was moved by the view, and in a way I was. It was the view of a life I'd forgotten was possible. My phone stayed quiet during those hikes. No frantic calls about forgotten lunches or emergency pickups. No photos of messes I'd have to clean or homework I'd have to supervise. Just the sound of birds whine through trees, my own breathing as my body remembered what it felt like to exist for itself. Week 4 brought the first crack in Melissa's facade. Mom called exhausted, saying Melissa had been struggling to find childcare she could afford. She'd hired a babysitter who quit after 2 days. The daycare wanted payment up front that she didn't have. Travis had gone to Nashville for a music opportunity and hadn't called in 5 days. Could I just watch them for one afternoon? No, I said, though the word burned. But I sent Mom links to government assistance programs, sliding scale daycare options, and numbers for emergency childcare services. I'd researched extensively, knowing this moment would come. Melissa needed to learn these systems existed, needed to use the resources available instead of treating me like an unlimited resource. The guilt was a constant companion those first weeks. I'd wake at 5:30 out of habit, expecting to hear Mason crying, only to remember he wasn't there. I'd buy groceries and automatically reach for the juice boxes Sophia loved, the specific crackers Jaden would actually eat. My apartment felt too quiet, too clean, too much like a mausoleum of the life I'd been living. But slowly something else crept in alongside the guilt. Freedom. Energy. I slept 8 hours straight for the first time in years. I read books that weren't about child development or homework help. I went to a wine tasting with new friends from work and didn't check my phone once. I remembered what my laugh sounded like when it wasn't interrupted. Month 2 arrived with news that Melissa had lost her latest job, fired for missing too many shifts when she couldn't find childcare. The family phone tree activated again, but this time with a different tone. Some relatives were beginning to understand what I'd been dealing with. Aunt Martha called to apologize, admitting she hadn't realized the extent of my involvement until she tried to watch all 4 kids for a weekend and barely survived. Travis left for good around week 10, a text breakup from Austin, where he decided to pursue his music permanently. Melissa posted about it dramatically on social media, but the comments were different now. "Where's the father of your other kids?" someone asked. "Maybe focus on the children you have instead of the relationship drama," another suggested. The narrative was shifting. I met Christopher at a coffee shop in month 3. He was reading a book I loved and we started talking about it. The conversation flowed naturally into dinner, then a second date, then a third. He had his own business, traveled regularly, wanted kids someday, but not right now. When I finally told him about my family situation, he listened without judgment, then said, "Good for you for setting boundaries. That must have been incredibly difficult." Mom called crying one evening, saying she and Dad were exhausted. They'd been watching the kids more and more as Melissa struggled. They were in their 60s, Dad had heart problems, and Mom's arthritis was worsening. They finally understood what I'd been handling alone for years. "We never should have let it get this bad," she admitted. "We failed you both, just in different ways." Melissa's pregnancy was progressing with complications. Stress, the doctor said. She needed bed rest, which meant she definitely couldn't watch 4 active kids. Mom asked very carefully if I might consider helping just until the baby was born. Just temporary, with strict boundaries. I said I'd think about it, but we both knew my answer. The call from Jaden came on a Tuesday. Melissa didn't know he'd taken her phone. "Aunt Hannah." He said, his voice small. "Are you still our family? Mommy says you don't want us anymore. But I told Sophia you're just taking a break because Mommy wasn't being fair. Are you coming back? When are you coming back?" I visited them that weekend, the first time in 3 months. Scheduled structured 2 hours at the park. They ran to me like I'd returned from war, which in a way I had. We played, talked, ate ice cream. I explained in age-appropriate ways that I loved them, but things had to change. Jaden understood more than he should have had to. Sophia just wanted to know if I still had her special blanket. I did. Christmas approached with negotiations through Mom about how to handle the holidays. I agreed to attend if strict boundaries were maintained. I would arrive at a specific time, leave at a specific time, and wouldn't be responsible for any childcare. Melissa agreed, having little choice since the alternative was me not coming at all. The holiday was awkward but manageable. Melissa barely spoke to me, but the kids were thrilled I was there. I'd bought them thoughtful gifts, things I knew they wanted, because I still paid attention just from a distance. Travis was gone, never even calling about the baby he'd fathered. Melissa looked tired, worn older than 31. Reality was setting in. When she went into labor in March, she called me. Not Mom, not Dad, me. "I'm scared, Hannah," she said through tears. "I don't know how I'm going to do this with 5 kids. I've screwed everything up." For the first time in years, she sounded like my little sister, not the entitled stranger she'd become. I went to the hospital, but maintained boundaries. I wasn't in the delivery room. I didn't promise to help raise this baby. But I held her hand in the hallway beforehand and told her she was stronger than she thought, that she could do this if she actually tried, that the resources existed if she'd use them. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a start. 6 months after that confrontation in my parents' living room, my life had transformed in ways I'd never imagined possible. The promotion I'd accepted had led to another one. I was senior marketing manager, now leading a team of 12, traveling to conferences, building a career that finally matched my potential. My salary had increased enough that I could afford a 2-bedroom apartment in a nicer neighborhood, with a home office and a guest room that wasn't permanently occupied by pack and plays. Christopher and I had been dating for 4 months. He understood my complicated family situation because he'd taken the time to actually listen. He came with me to Jaden's school play, sitting beside me while I recorded it on my phone, not trying to parent or interfere, just being supportive. When Melissa showed up late and frazzled, he squeezed my hand but said nothing. He understood boundaries in a way my family was still learning. Melissa had finally enrolled in online college courses, pursuing an associate degree in dental hygiene. It had taken her hitting rock bottom, losing multiple jobs, and Travis abandoning her while 7 months pregnant to realize she needed actual skills and steady income. The state assistance she'd finally applied for covered most of her daycare costs, something she could have accessed years ago if she'd tried. The baby, a girl named Luna, not Wolfgang, thank God, was 3 months old now. I'd met her several times during scheduled visits. She was beautiful with Melissa's eyes and an easy smile. I loved her immediately but differently. This time I was Aunt Hannah from the start, not a surrogate parent. The boundaries were clear, and surprisingly, Melissa was respecting them. My relationship with the older kids had evolved into something healthier. I saw them every Sunday for 4 hours. We'd go to museums, parks, movies, actual aunt activities. Then I'd return them to Melissa, who was slowly learning to parent them herself. She'd joined a single mother support group that provided both practical resources and accountability. It was progress, slow but real. The Europe trip finally happened in May. 3 weeks through Italy, France, and Spain. I sent postcards to the kids from every city, sharing my adventures without guilt. Christopher met me in Paris for the last week, and we watched the sunset from the Eiffel Tower, something I dreamed about since college. I didn't check my phone once for emergency texts because there weren't any. Melissa was handling her life. My parents and I had repaired our relationship through family therapy. Mom admitted she'd enabled Melissa because she felt guilty about working so much when we were young. Dad recognized he'd checked out emotionally rather than deal with the conflict. We were learning to relate as adults, not just playing out old family dynamics. They still helped with the kids, but with limits, now boundaries, we all maintained. The most surprising development was my sister's growth. She'd publicly apologized on Facebook, admitting she'd taken advantage of me for years. The post went viral in our extended family, with relatives finally understanding what had really been happening. Some called to apologize for their judgment. Others stayed silent, too proud to admit they'd been wrong. I didn't need their validation anymore. Work had become a source of joy rather than escape. I was good at my job when I could focus on it fully. My team respected me, my ideas were implemented, and I'd been selected to lead our biggest campaign of the year. The CEO had mentioned executive track potential. At 34, I was finally building the career I'd always wanted, but never thought possible. Melissa and I had coffee once a month now, just the two of us. We talked about real things, not just logistics and emergencies. She told me about her classes, her struggles with dating as a single mom of 5, her fears about the future. I shared my work challenges, my relationship progress, my own fears about whether I'd want kids someday. We were becoming sisters again, not parent and child, or employer and unpaid nanny. The kids were thriving with structure and consistency. Jaden had joined the school soccer team, something he'd wanted to do for years, but couldn't because I couldn't commit to practice schedules. Sophia was in Girl Scouts with a troop leader who wasn't me. Mason had started preschool and was making friends. Emma was potty training with Melissa, reaching milestones with her actual mother. I'd started individual therapy to process the years of resentment and understand my own patterns of enabling. My therapist helped me see that my identity had become so wrapped up in being needed that I'd been afraid to set boundaries. Who was I if not the responsible one, the savior, the one who held everything together? It turned out I was someone worth knowing, worth loving, worth prioritizing. Christopher and I moved in together after 6 months. He brought his books and his coffee maker and his quiet presence that didn't demand anything I couldn't give. We cooked dinner together, planned trips, talked about the future. When he proposed on our 1-year anniversary, I said yes immediately. I could say yes because my life was mine to share now. The wedding was small, intimate, with the kids as flower girls and ring bearer. Melissa was my maid of honor, and she gave a speech that made everyone cry. She talked about sacrifice and love and the difference between helping and enabling. She thanked me for loving her kids enough to stop enabling her, for forcing her to become the mother they deserved. It was the apology I'd needed but never expected. Looking back on those dark years, I understand now that love isn't sacrifice without limits. It's not setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. Real love includes boundaries, includes the word no, includes protecting yourself, so you have something left to give. I learned that helping someone can sometimes mean not helping them, that enabling disguised as support serves no one. The kids still call me their favorite aunt, but now it's a title I've earned through presence and love, not through exhaustion and resentment. Melissa parents her children imperfectly but genuinely. My parents' grandparent, without burden. And I live my life fully, completely without apology. Sometimes Sophia still asks if I remember when I was like their mommy. I tell her I remember, but I explain that now I get to be something better. I get to be Aunt Hannah who chooses to spend time with them because I love them, not because I have to. I get to be whole and happy and present. I get to show them what it looks like when a woman values herself enough to say no enough to choose herself. The lesson I learned through all of this is simple but profound. Family is important, but you cannot pour from an empty cup. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for everyone's growth. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and allow others to step up. When you respect yourself enough to say no, you teach others to respect you too. And choosing yourself isn't abandoning others, it's ensuring you have something real to offer when you choose to give. My sister and I are both better mothers and women because I finally chose myself. She's a mother because she had to be. I'm an aunt because I want to be. The kids see two women who've learned to value themselves, to set boundaries, to grow from mistakes. That's worth more than any sacrifice I could have made. Life doesn't always give you the chances you deserve when you deserve them. Sometimes you have to create those chances by standing up and saying enough. Sometimes you have to break everything to rebuild it properly. Sometimes choosing yourself is the greatest gift you can give to everyone you love. I want to thank everyone who watched this story. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? What was the hardest part about choosing yourself? Please share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about personal growth and family dynamics. Share this with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose themselves. Remember, setting boundaries isn't about building walls. It's about building bridges that can actually support the weight of healthy relationships. Thank you for listening, and remember, you deserve a life that belongs to you.